Hello YouTube, this is my book wrap up for the month of May. I managed to read 9 books in May, which I'm pretty impressed with myself for that because it was kind of a crazy month at work and also I went to BEA. So I started this book by reading Pollyanna by Eleanor H. Porter. I got the audiobook for this one, which I found to be extremely delightful. I didn't really know what to expect with this book. I know it's a book sort of meant for younger readers, and the reason I picked it is actually because I needed a book that was over 100 years old for the Pop Sugar Reading Challenge. This book was written in the early 1900s. I believe it's actually, as of right now, 102 years old, so it was just sort of getting in there under the mark. I really enjoyed it. There was obviously a couple of antiquated things just by the nature of how old it was, but I was very pleasantly surprised by how many of the themes in the book were still relevant today, and I really enjoyed Pollyanna as a character. She was kind of like a little Luna Lovegood, which I really liked. I just found it to be a really pleasant experience. If you haven't read Pollyanna, I really recommend it, especially if you need a book over 100 years old. Next up, I read Saint Anything by Sarah Dessen. Penguin actually sent me this book before it came out, which was awesome. I haven't read a lot of Sarah Dessen books. I think I've read 1 or 2 previously, and that was in high school. I'm not always drawn to her books, but this one just had the prettiest cover, so I just picked it up immediately and read it. I enjoyed it. I think that it tackled some interesting topics. I think that it kind of tried to do too much. There were so many characters and so many issues. It was kind of hard to navigate the story. This book could have been like 2 different books entirely about the different things going on. I think that the plotlines with her new friends could have been a whole book on its own, and the plotline with her brother, and especially with Ames, could have been another whole book. I feel like when books try to do too much like that, they don't necessarily do any individual plotline enough justice. I think that there were a lot of things in here I would have liked to see just a little bit more about. You know, like, it was okay, but I wanted a little more. Then I read The Heir by Kira Cass. I actually already posted an entire review of this, so if you are curious of my thoughts, or really a 15-minute rant, I definitely recommend that you go check that out because I've already said it all there. I liked the selection a lot. It's terrible literature, but I found it to be a lot of fun, and so I was skeptical but excited when we found out that we were going to be getting 2 more books. They did not live up. I thought it was still an experience that I'm glad that I had. I ended up giving this book a 3, and you should go watch the full review if you want to. Then I kind of had a bit of a low month for a while there with books, because the next book that I read was Talon by Julie Kagawa, and this was a book that I've talked a lot about on Goodreads already if you follow me there. It was one of the books that was on sale for the Audible deal of the day, and it sounded like a fun sort of contemporary romance with dragons, which I know sounds crazy, but that's why I got it. It ended up being one of the worst books I've ever read. I just thought that the plot didn't make sense, things weren't believable, I didn't like the characters, there was just so many problems with this book. I can't even begin to describe just the frustration that I felt while listening to this story. If you want to give it a try, go for it, but I gave this book a 1. It's the only 1 that I've given out this year. I did not like it. Then I read Attachments by Rainbow Rowell. I cannot for the life of me find my copy. I only read this a couple weeks ago. I must have lent it to someone, but I don't know where it is. This was the last Rainbow Rowell book for me to read. I'd read all of her other ones. I really enjoyed it. I actually find that I like her adult books slightly more than her YA titles, and Attachments was no exception. Right away I was kind of thinking that this seemed sort of unbelievable, but by the time you get to the end and by the time you see how it all wraps up, I just didn't care. It was so cute and I loved the characters so much, and I felt like I was such a part of their lives. I know that's sort of the nature of the story. The plot of this book is that this guy is an internet security guard, and this is set back in the 90s, and he ends up reading the emails of these 2 women who are very forthgiving with the information that they share about their lives in their emails with each other, and he ends up falling for one of them, and I just loved it. It was just fun, and it was exactly what I needed to get out of the slump that I was in from reading The Heir and Talon. I ended up giving Attachments a 4.5 because it was great. Then I was right back down in my slump because then I read The 100 by Cass Morgan. Again, I listened to this on audiobook. I kind of like when audiobooks have multiple narrators for different characters, and I was looking forward to this, especially with the TV show that recently started airing. I was excited to read it, and I have never had a more confusing book reading experience because I could not tell you the plot of that book. I just listened to it, and it was just really confusing because it's about these kids who are sent to Earth to basically see if it's livable, and then it's about one that gets left behind, and so there was like 25% of the book was her story with a relationship with a guy that we don't really know why it's related to what's happening on Earth, and in hindsight I can really only like plot-wise say they landed on Earth, and I have no idea what they were doing there. I have no visual of if they made shelters or whatever, and then there was like a fire, and then some stuff happened. I don't know, it just was really disjointed and a very bizarre book reading experience. It was weird. It was a really, I've never read an entire book and then felt like I didn't read a book afterward. It was so weird. Then I listened to The Utterly Uninteresting and Unadventurous Tales of Fred the Vampire Accountant by Drew Hayes. This was a book that I just saw while browsing on Audible. It had such a fun and interesting name that I had to give it a try. Also, I believe it was on sale. It ended up being pretty great. It was about this guy named Fred, who is a vampire accountant. Basically, this means that he was an accountant, and then one day he became a vampire, and then he just kind of kept being an accountant, and his life wasn't all that interesting, except that once the book starts, he goes to his high school reunion where he runs into an old friend who's also sort of involved in this undead world, and so then his life gets very exciting and there's a lot of adventure and a really great cast of characters, and it was just fun. It was a fun, quick audiobook and I really liked it. Then I read The Woods Volume 2 by James Tinian IV. I had read the first volume recently and I liked it, but this one I thought was a lot better. I felt like the first volume had just sort of hit its stride right at the end, and so I had been looking forward to picking up this one, and I'm really glad I did because all of the characters get a lot more backstory in this one. Each volume in this is centered around one of the characters, and you find out a lot more about what's going on in the world, sort of. What I really like about this graphic novel is that it's very visceral and makes no apologies for having disgusting imagery in it, and I read it on an airplane, and so I was kind of like, I hope no one sees this thing bursting out of this guy's arm. The last book I read in the month of May was An Ember in the Ashes by Sabit Heir. This is the book that Penguin had sent me at the beginning of the year as one of their sort of predicted blockbuster hits of 2015, and at first glance I wasn't super interested in it. It felt more fantasy than I normally like to read, and so I'd actually given it to a friend, but when I saw the hype that was going around in the last couple of months in the booktube community, I actually got it back from her and read it, and for the first half I really enjoyed it. I thought it was an interesting world. I appreciated how dark it was. A lot of books kind of shy away from being that dark and disturbing, but then in the second half I just started getting really frustrated because things were just so dark and so disturbing that I wasn't enjoying reading it anymore. There was just a couple of things, I don't want to spoil anything, but some of the trials, especially the third trial, just like, it was just, I don't know, it was just like too dark for me. I don't want to see humans being placed in positions where they have to do these horrible things to other humans and themselves, and it was like an emotional journey that took me places that I didn't necessarily want to go. I also found this book to have a couple problematic things going on in it, like the word girly is used as a derogatory word more than once, and I felt like any other word could have been substituted in there, weakness, emotional, but instead the author chose to use girly, which really bothered me. I also was sort of bothered by how rape was viewed and portrayed in this book. I'm not saying that we should never have things like rape in books, because I think that these are important topics to discuss, but this book very much just kind of was blasé about rape, and there were times when, again, rather than just saying like, did he rape you, it could have been like, did he lay hands on you, or did he accost you, or this book just seemed very unconcerned with how shocking like just rape as a concept is. That's just not a world that I want to read about, where rape is just like commonplace and fine and people are cool with it. I mean, these are obviously in the book sort of bad people, and so it wasn't that like everybody was walking around raping everybody, but I still just wish that it hadn't been so commonplace and so just like a term that's just tossed around. So I don't know, I ended up giving this book a 3.5. I don't think that it lived up to the hype that everybody said. I thought that there were plot points that didn't really make sense. I didn't find the relationship. There was like a love rectangle in this book, and I found that to be kind of unnecessary. I also didn't really believe the attraction between the two main characters. All of a sudden they were like risking everything for each other, and I just didn't really see that. I didn't really buy it, but I did not love it and was just a little bothered by some of the problematic stuff that I saw in it. So that's what I read in the month of May. I had a decent reading month. I mean, I read a lot of books, but I didn't love a lot of the books that I read. I'm hoping that June is better. I'm trying to be really selective about picking books that I hope are great in the month of June. And here are some of the things that I'm planning to read. I've actually started this already. Mistwalker by Sandra Mitchell. This is a book that I picked up at a half-price book sale. I thought it sounded really interesting because there's a lot of like repetitive plot devices used in YA, but this is a book about like a family of lobster fishers, and that just sounded so different than anything that I've read recently that I picked it up because it sounded interesting at least. Then I got Tiny Pretty Things by Sona Charapotra and Donnell Clayton. Those are some names, man. So this is a book, it seems like Pretty Little Liars, but ballet. Heard it's good. I won this at the Epic Reads party at BEA, and so I'm gonna be reading this. Actually, my friend and I got 2 books this month that have to do with ballet. So Jen, who actually just started making videos on YouTube, and I'll link her down below, we're each gonna read these different ballet stories, and then we're just gonna switch. I don't know, it's a thing we're doing. Ballet book swap, that's what we're calling it. So I don't have a lot of plans for this month. I'm sure I'll be reading a lot of books. I also started listening to I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson on audiobook, which is also one of the summer reads for my book club. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I talked about in this video, as always, and let me know what else you're reading this summer, what you're looking forward to. If you guys like what you see here, I got some new eyeballs on this channel because of this Paper Town live show that I did recently. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos like this, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time. Goodbye!